All right. So hey guys. Oh, and here comes Joanne. Hi, Kaden. Hi, Joanna. All right. As soon as she gets in. All right. Well, she's connecting in. So just to let you guys know, we're recording this for any students who couldn't make it in. My name is Carrie. I'm a TA for the course. Olivia is behind me, my co-TA. Um, Overall, I know that there's been a lot of questions and there's some clarification that needs to be made. I know this class is difficult to do asynchronous. I actually, just a quick little background, I did my undergrad here. I'm a first year grad student in the IO program under Lisa Finkelstein. But I did my 305 here under Alicia Santuzzi. I did my 306 here, and then I also did the lab. So I'm kind of familiar with the feeling of being in 306 and understanding, oh, we have to write a paper. So I think what the goal is for today is we have a PowerPoint. We are going to present it. The overall questions that I've been seeing so far has just been related to SPSS and how to read the output and how to handle the APA analyses, but we will go over some things. Before we go into specific questions, is there anything you guys wanted to talk about? Or I should say, before we get into our talk, is there anything that you guys had questions about?
I had a question about the linear regression model. Because I've redone it about 4 times now. And every time, like I followed along with the video the first time, and she said I added way too much in there and to take some stuff out, which I did.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at gender and how it affects prosocial behavior and then the interaction it has with depressive symptoms.
Hmm.
And the last email I got um said to said that I didn't put anything with prosocial behavior in my regression model, and that I needed to add prosocial behavior in there. But that was all I had in there for this last regression model. I had the dependent as prosocial behavior, like the combined prosocial behavior, and then I had the independent as what's your gender, and then gender by prosocial behavior. And that's the last one I turned in that I was told I didn't have any pro-social behavior in there. And I was like, that's literally all I put in there this time.
Which is, can you, I'm sorry, I'm gonna just jot this down. Which assignment was that for?
It was for the one that was due, I believe it was Sunday, um,
Okay.
where we had to send in our SPSS outputs and everything.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. Before I answer that, um, just, I apologize. I'm going to try and say names correctly. Jessip, Shanquay, and Linda. Did you guys have similar questions in regards to the analyses? Do you think it would be beneficial for you guys to start with that first?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I did have a question about assignment 5, which was the SPSS outputs.
Okay.
I got some feedback when I met with Dr. Wright, but it was another group session, so we couldn't spend as much time as I needed.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I just kind of want to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm including the right things and everything.
Okay.
Same for me. Same over here.
Okay.
It's just yeah, literally what she said.
Okay. So you want to jump?
Yeah, I can start my PowerPoint.
All right. So give me one quick moment. What I'm going to do is I am going to share. We have a PowerPoint that we are going to go over.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
I see that this meeting is being recorded.
Yeah.
Would we be able to access it after?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah,
because I'm not going to be able to speak as much. So, yeah, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So the goal of this meeting, and to be honest, what Olivia and I would like to do going forward is maybe do something similar every week, just so you kind of can see our faces and we can touch base. Um, Today, we really want to hit your SPSS questions and make sure that we can get you back on the same track. But going forward, the goal is to continue to record so you guys can come back,
Oh,
especially,
perfect.
yeah. This isn't
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your help.
Yeah.
this is an asynchronous class, and we recognize that. And I worked full time during my undergrad, and so I know how difficult that can be, that not everybody has that opportunity. So I just want to make sure that everyone has access. Okay, so coming back into this, I am going to share my screen. Oh, hold on, we have another person. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
It said that you started sharing the screen, but it's not actually up.
Okay, how about now?
There it is.
Yay. All right. All right. So let me introduce you to my co-TA, Olivia. She is brilliant. She is a second year in IO under Dr. Rachel Safe, and she is so much stronger in SPSS than I am. And so I am going to let her kind of field your questions. So I'm going to let her take over.
Yeah, let me see if I can just move the slides. Okay.
I'm sorry to cut you off before you start. Is it possible, like, I don't know, like once you open up the PowerPoint, it made it a full screen on here, and I can't seem to kind of do a split screen because I want to have my assignment up and also look at this. So could you kind of make it smaller?
Yeah, give me 1 second. We'll figure this out. Do you have a button? If you look at okay, so in the corner of your Zoom where the
The view
arrows are,
button?
will that let you minimize it at all?
No, let's see. Ah, there we are. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So I created this PowerPoint last night and today. So if there's any like grammatical errors, it's fine. We'll pretend like they're not there.
It was made with love, just know that.
And I forgot that it was Halloween halfway through, so I had to change the slide format halfway through to Halloween to make it on theme, obviously. So, today we're just going to talk about SPSS a little bit, and then going through step by step what your analysis looks like, different types of statistics, and then how to write those in APA format. I don't have anything on the tables yet. I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through that, just because you're essentially like count as many boxes as you can in your SPSS output table and then try to create that in your Word. And then she also has a video as well, Dr. Wright. And then I have a resource for you at the end, which is the APA formatting guide. In that there's going to be an entire example empirical research paper, which is going to be very similar to what you're writing here. And then we're actually coming up with like a mock research paper that is identical to what you're doing here as well. So you can kind of map that on with your variables. And then, yeah, and then I'll take questions after just kind of walking everyone through the analysis. Does that sound good? Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Okay, so just kind of going back to the syllabus and talking about like what is this course? What is the purpose of this course? It's essentially, hold on, let me pull up my own because that's kind of messed up. It's 306 is a class to prepare you for your lab of 434 where you conduct your own research project. And once you conduct your own research project, you will write that into a paper. And those papers are probably what you're most familiar with right now as a student. And you've probably read several of them where you have your abstract and your introduction and your methods and your results and your sections. That's your empirical research paper. And that's what we're doing in this class is we're creating a project that can be, or that we can write an empirical paper on. Does that make sense?
We're gonna say yes.
Yes, sorry. I'm answering, but I keep forgetting, like, because of the
No,
background noise, I'm on mute.
and I may not make sense as well, and this was created
Feel
so soon.
free if you have any questions to stop us at any point in time. I don't want you to feel like we're speaking at you. So as we're going through these things, feel free, let us know. You can interrupt at any point.
Yeah, so I just kind of took a couple sections from the syllabus out. It's always nice to like revisit the syllabus throughout the course and just kind of look at the formatting of the course, and maybe that will make better sense as to how the homeworks feed into the assignments that feed into your final paper. So directly from the syllabus is: thus, this course will focus on developing and conducting a research study in psychology. This includes developing a research question, conducting a search of existing literature, writing in APA style, selecting appropriate research designs, ethics and professionalism, and collecting and managing data, and communicating conclusions to broad audiences. Essentially just saying you're going to conduct a research project with a few variables of interest, and then you're going to explain your findings in a paper. In this class, I will review general skills related to empirical research designs for psychology topics that you learned in a previous research methods course. So this is your 305 course. A lot of what you learned in your 305 course can be applied here in 306 to write up the paper. So you were kind of intaking or consuming those papers in 305, and now you're going to write it.
You go from consumer to producer.
Yes. And this class will help you succeed in your research lab of Psyc304 that you have to take next semester or a year before graduating. You will be conducting more research projects in the future as a psychology major. So this class provides you with that first opportunity to conduct, write, and present your own research questions. How is that landing right now? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Move along faster. We already know this.
Is Psych 434 required for graduation now or no?
Yeah. So, well, it doesn't necessarily need to be 434, but you need to do a lab component.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, I'm
Yeah.
set to graduate in December and I have not taken 434.
No, no, no.
Okay, just a
Yeah.
lab. Okay.
So in order to get a bachelor's at NIU, you need to do 305, 306, and then you need to do a lab. So 305 is the consuming part that you guys worked on. 306 is the producing. So producing is essentially writing the paper that people will consume. When you move into your lab, can I ask which lab you're in? Are you in the lab currently, or you will be?
No, I took a lab. I took a year off from school, so I took 305 actually like 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
Um, I took, I think it was like developmental, like child development or something for that. I don't remember which one it was exactly though.
But no, but did you take, because normally at NIU, you have to take a lab either after 306 or at the same time as 306. A 306 is a prerequisite for a lab. And the
Yeah,
only,
so I was in a different catalog originally because, yeah, it used to be two labs and 305, and then I took that year off and they threw me in the new catalog, which is why I'm in this class now.
gotcha. I just wanted to double check just because you said that. So
Yeah.
cool, cool. All right. I digress.
No, you're good. Um, okay. So now
Scary.
we're going to talk about what psychological research is. And a lot of you probably already know this just from being in the class and being a psych major and participating in studies in 102. But I just kind of wanted to refresh and put it within the context of this class so it can maybe make a little more sense. So research methodology in psychology refers to the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. When we say scientific, that means that we are proposing hypotheses or trying to predict behavior based on models, and then we test it using statistical analyses. It involves collecting data, analyzing it, and drawing conclusions about human behavior and thinking patterns. Research in psychology uses various methods, including experiments, surveys, observations, and correlational studies. And hopefully, as we all know, in this class, we will be doing survey data and conducting correlations, as well as regression models. So data. What is data? Data refers to the pieces of information that researchers collect through their studies, and that can be either their demographic characteristics of participants or their responses on psychological scales or observations of their behaviors. And then researchers analyze that data using statistical methods to draw conclusions and answer the research questions. And then there's sort of two broad types of research, and we're focusing on empirical research. And empirical research essentially tests different parts of models or of theories. There are two primary types of data, quantitative data, which is what we're using here, and qualitative data. Quantitative data involves numerical measurements and is often analyzed using statistical methods. It is gathered through scores on psychological scales. So that would be like your pro-social scale or your depression scale or your life satisfaction scale. That's how quantitative data is gathered. So the scores describe the use of the scales to measure constructs like self-esteem, prejudice, and perfectionism. A researcher might use a scale with multiple items that participants rate on a numerical scale and then calculate to an overall score for each participant. That's essentially when we're asking, are you computing, are you averaging their score, or are you adding all of their item scores up for an overall survey score? So for most of them, you're looking at average, right? So depression is scored 1 to 5. If someone is 1 on that scale or reports 1 on an item for a depressive symptom, that means that they don't have that depressive symptom. If they report 5, that means that they're experiencing that depressive symptom and probably really strongly. Does that make sense? I have another example with life satisfaction as well. So essentially, quantitative data is like your score on your life satisfaction survey. And then qualitative data is non-numerical. It's often open response questions on surveys. So for like life satisfaction, you can ask those 5 quantitative questions. So asking people put your feelings into numbers, and then you can ask them overall, how happy are you or how satisfied are you with your life? And then they can input like a paragraph or something explaining, and that would be qualitative data compared to quantitative data. And you analyze that in different ways. And so we are only focusing on quantitative data in this class. And quantitative data, for example, creates like models. And so I can't use an example from this exact class, but say your IV is like pro-social behavior. It goes at the front of the model. So your independent predictor variable, I study stress and well-being. So oftentimes my independent predictor variable is some kind of stressful event at work. And then once that stressful event happens, that can then influence this other variable of well-being or your dependent outcome variable. And your correlation is just looking at that relationship between what is the relationship between experiencing a stressful event and well-being. And so there's a few different ways that this relationship can happen. So either as stressful events occur more often, you can have higher well-being, but that kind of seems like counterintuitive, right? Like stress makes you unhappy. So what we would expect is that as these stressful events continue occurring, that well-being is lowered, which means that the number right here, the correlation or the relationship between the two of them is negative, because as one increases, the other decreases. Whereas like if this were to come out and say, okay, as stressful events increase, people's well-being does as well, that would be counterintuitive, and we would think, oh no, what's happening with this data? Because that's not what we're expected to predict. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions yet?
I would also say, and this is going to go back to your research question, and this is why it's always important to understand what your question is so right now what Olivia is saying is that some level of the stressful event will lead to some stressful or to some level of well-being. However, it's good to know, are we looking at how a stressful event is going to affect well-being, or are we going to flip it and say, how is well-being going to lead to these levels of a stressful event. So if you were to remove Olivia's variables and insert yours in there, that's going to be where it's important to understand what your question is. As an example, narcissism and life satisfaction. Um, Depending on the order that you put that in, that you could be asking two different questions. And so just going into those initial assignments of identifying that question, I think it's good to just make sure that you revisit and understand what yours is.
Yeah, that's a great point. So essentially exactly what Carrie just said, you're going to be taking out my independent variable and my dependent variable and just kind of putting yours in. And this for me helps me visualize like what am I trying to answer and predict. So like with your example of narcissism and life satisfaction, maybe you think narcissists tend to be happier because according to literature, they seek out more social approval. And then that would lead to higher levels of life satisfaction. So you're expecting this relationship to be positive and strong. Does that make sense?
Somebody throw us a bone.
It does make sense, but the only thing is, when does the third variable come into play? Or
Great question.
That is the next slide. So
okay.
your models are moderated regression models, which means that you're adding something called a quasi-independent moderator variable. And moderators are just essentially asking if we add this additional variable, does that change the relationship that we already know to exist between the two here?
As an example, a stressful event and well-being could be related. However, it depends on their social support. And so when you move into your lab component, assuming you haven't already taken it, they'll talk a lot about moderators and mediators. Currently, we're only using a moderator, but moderators ask the question, well, it depends. And so as far as your variables, you have a relationship between your two variables, but then the results could be different depending on age, or the results could be different depending on ethnicity, or different depending on gender. And so that's going to be where those relationships come together. So as an example, your relationship between narcissism and life satisfaction, the relationship could be different depending on their age.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would suspect the older they are, then this I won't speculate. That's your research.
But yeah, so that's exactly right. So essentially with this question here, you're looking just at your main independent variable, your main dependent variable. This arrow is going to be your correlation, and your correlation is the strength and the direction between your two variables. So for example, stressful events, we know should predict lower well-being. So that should be a negative 0.34 correlation.
Okay, I'm going to interject for just a quick second. So Olivia said correlations are dependent upon strength and direction. And so dialing back to how you understand your strength and you understand your direction, I want to point this out. So correlations are going to go between, and this is going to be probably backwards, but between a -1 and a 1. So the stronger it is to +1, or the closer it is to -1, equals a stronger relationship. Now, the closer that it is to 0, the strength of the relationship is less because there's really not a big variation. And so strength is going to be those polar ends. So now going into and building upon that, it's also the absolute value. So as an example, let's say that you have a negative 0.85 and then you have a positive 0.34. Even though intuitively 0.34 may seem stronger because it's in a positive direction, it's not going to be. It would, that negative 0.85 would actually be stronger because it's closer to -1. So that's going to be when we talk about the strength. Now, as far as the direction, it builds upon what Olivia was talking about with whether it is a positive or a negative. If it's a positive, tell me if I'm saying this incorrectly. If it's a positive, as one increases, the other is increasing. If it's negative, as one is increasing, the other is decreasing. So that's going to be your direction. So if you have a negative direction, they're moving in different directions. If your correlation is positive, they're moving in the same. And so if you have a negative 0.99, you have a strong negative relationship with your variables. If you have a, making up numbers, 0.85, then you have a strong positive relationship with your variables. Does that make sense when we talk about that for the explanation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because that's going to be like understanding the words behind it. It, for me personally, it helps me to make sense of it. So when you are writing out, when you're writing out your results section, you want to understand what is happening with your variables because you're going to see the numbers there. But sometimes, and again, for me, if I just see a whole lot of numbers, I don't always understand. So sometimes I have to just take it back to really understand like that simplified relationship.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. So essentially with the kind of building with what Carrie was saying and adding in that moderating variable, the stressful event. Okay, so now we're thinking about, let's talk about direction and strength in regards to our example. So stressful event and well-being, we expect that to be a strong negative correlation. So let's just say, for example, it would be R equals -0.6. That's a really strong, significant negative correlation. However, we expect that social support probably plays a role here. And for all of you, this would be your demographic variable that you chose, either age, ethnicity, or gender. And so this model is asking, do higher levels of perceived social support change the relationship between stressful events and well-being? So maybe if you're experiencing something really stressful, it's not as bad for your well-being if you have people around you who are helping you through that event. But if you have that negative or a stressful event without that social support present in the model, then your well-being will continue to be just as negative or as balanced. So with your stressful event and well-being, maybe this correlation is -0.6, but once you add social support, maybe that relationship is -0.3. So it's closer to 0. It gets weaker. It's not as negative. It's not as a strong bad well-being event. And yeah, does that make sense? Just
Yes,
like,
I do have a question.
yeah.
So I know that, if it's closer to 0, it's more on the weak side. What if it's like a plus or minus or negative or positive, like 5.0? Would you consider that just moderate?
5 would never be a correlation. A correlation will always be a decimal point. It will be between negative.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant 0.50. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
So you're like determining if that's significantly strong.
Right.
You will have a significant star right next to that number, right next to that decimal point in your SPSS output, and that will indicate if it's a significant relationship. There's typically thresholds for what you would consider like strong versus weak. Something over, I think, like 0.2 or 0.3 is considered like moderate. High would be like 0.6 or above. So like 0.5
Okay.
would still be considered like a pretty high correlation. So like there's kind of generalized standards for what you consider to be weak versus strong. But in terms of significance, your SPSS output will tell you that in your table. It will have a significant star.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily matter for this project if it's a strong or a weak relationship. It just matters if it's significant. So if your SPSS output has that star next to it. But it's important to know if like what strength is.
Yeah, because we still have the assignments that are due today, and I don't know if that's one of the questions on there, so I figured I would ask because I know that we have to like break down the statistics in one of the assignments that is due today.
Yeah. And so going back into that, when you're looking at your correlation table, the way that they're set up is kind of like a matrix. So you would find your variable on the left, you would find your variable on the top, and then you would bring them together. And you'll see your, I think it says Pearson's correlation, which is going to be your R. And then beneath it is going to be your significance. And if you see those stars there, and so what I would say, and you will learn this in your labs, whenever you are reading a table or a chart or a graph, always read the instructions or the notes or whatever is there, because they'll tell you right there on your correlation table at the bottom what those stars mean. And so, yeah.
And the more stars you get, the stronger and more significant the correlation is.
Yeah. And it's just going to be, I would say it's going to be more important in your wording that when you give your results, you give them as either significant or non-significant. And those words are going to be really important. You know, the data showed that there was a non-significant relationship between stressful event and well-being. And then you would put in parentheses your mean or your correlation and your p-value.
Okay. Is the p-value on here? I didn't even see it.
The p-value for the correlations probably won't be on there, just those stars, but for your ANOVA table, for your regression and your t-test, you should have significance values or p-values.
I stand corrected.
You're good.
I tried.
So does this kind of overall model, looking at a normal kind of regression predictor model versus a moderated model?
Yes, and so the moderator variable is going to be that demographic variable, correct?
Yeah. So oftentimes psychological constructs differ between groups, demographic groups, because the way our social structure is structured, we all have varying experiences because of demographics. So moving into our project, I just wanted to reiterate, like, we're using quantitative data only, which means numbers. Our procedure, participants self-reported their levels of the variables by rating agreement with the statement on a scale. So this means that rather than for like life satisfaction, the participants reported their own life satisfaction. I am satisfied with my life, fill in the bubble 5, right? Not, oh, their boss looked and saw that they were smiling today, so now we know they're happy. That would be a different type of data. This is self-reported data. People are talking about their own feelings about the variables being asked. And then, so for an example, I'm satisfied with my life is rated on rated on agreement, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. So someone who chooses 1 is not at all satisfied with their life, whereas someone who chooses 5 is as satisfied as someone can be with their life. Our variables, just to kind of walk through the research question again and kind of what your research question should encompass with all 3 of them. You have your independent variables and your dependent variables, which are the same because they're just non-demographic constructs. So pro-social behavior, depressive symptoms, openness to experience, narcissism, and life satisfaction. So you can choose any of those to predict the other. And then your quasi-independent moderator variables are either gender, ethnicity, or age. So I'm guessing everyone has like a pretty good grasp on that now. Does anyone have any questions about this slide before I move on?
Not necessarily the slide itself, but the type of research that this is. If we have a quasi-independent variable, is this not a quasi-experimental research design?
So the word quasi specifically, is that what you're wondering about, or if you have 2 independent variables?
I think I have 2 independent variables.
You can have 2 independent variables.
Oh, okay, that's what confused me.
No matter what. Yeah. So experiment is random assignment, which just means like you have a group of people and then you randomly assign them to conditions. So either these people experience stress and these people don't. Whereas correlational survey data is we're asking people, did you experience a stressful event? Yes or no. The stress isn't us putting it onto the participants to see how they react. We're asking people, have you experienced stress and how did you react? So it's correlational survey data versus experimental causation data. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, so my research question specifically is, does gender influence the relationship between social networking websites and depressive symptoms?
Okay.
And so that's two independent variables, right? Or is that
No, so your independent variables and your dependent variables for this project are essentially that you can choose from the same variables for each because they're both non-demographic psychological constructs. So like prosocial behavior can predict narcissism, and narcissism could predict prosocial behavior, and kind of the same thing with the rest of them. So it doesn't really matter which one you choose.
Well, and building upon that though, if your question was how does gender, okay, tell me your question one more time, I apologize.
does gender influence the relationship between social networking websites and depressive symptoms?
Okay, so your model looks like techie,
She's trying it out right now.
depression, and then gender.
Yep. So essentially, the way that your question is being asked is essentially the way that your question is being asked, the way that you just described it, is that your technology usage would be your independent variable because it may lead to depression. However, it's going to depend on gender. So the way that you just described it, I would say depression is your dependent variable because that's the outcome. As far as what leads to those depression symptoms, that would be your predictor, which is your independent variable. And so that would be the technology usage. Did that make sense?
It does. And I think that's another reason. Hold on one second. I'm looking to find which assignment it was, because I think I put that it was 2, and Dr. Wright is like, okay, so you have, wait, I just want to make sure. Oh my gosh, I cannot find which assignment
That's okay.
was. Sorry, I don't want to hold everyone up.
I promise you're okay. As I speak for everybody else.
Okay, there we go. Forensic study. Okay, there are 2 non-demographic variables. Yes. Oh, I guess I never stated which one. Okay, so I have one independent, one dependent, and then the moderator variable.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and so how would I guess I'm only accustomed to seeing like independent and dependent variables listed. How do you also list the like gender?
Do you mean like in your question itself or
No, like in the let's see. Sorry, I'm really trying to find out which.
Are you wondering about the regression model?
Well, even that too.
Yeah, because that's what I was wondering about because I've done it like 5 times and each time it's like, oh no, you did it wrong.
Yeah, I have. So what's up next is I'm going to talk about statistics. So yeah, the really fun stuff that everyone's like really excited to start talking about. And then I talk about the different types and kind of what they mean and why we look at them. And then I go through the exact steps or buttons that you press on SPSS to find that. So this is for frequencies, descriptives, how to transform your moderation or your interaction. And then
yeah.
your correlation, your t-test, and then your regression. And then I can kind of walk you guys through that process as well.
And I would just say if this feels like we're building slow, we're kind of doing it purposefully. Since this is our first video together, we just want to make sure that you understand like the foundation of your project first and what we're doing with it. Because then once we get into the analyses, you have a foundation to build upon if you do have any questions.
Like it can make more sense or numbers that usually don't make sense can make more sense if you understand like the variables behind it. Like I was just kind of saying with stress and well-being, if you know that stress and well-being should be negatively related, that as stress happens, we should be less happy. But you're seeing in your correlation matrix that that's positive. If you have that foundation of knowing, okay, well, according to literature, this should not be a positive relationship, you can kind of see like, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong in my analysis because this isn't negative the way that I know it should be, or the way that stress happens to me and well-being happens. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like, so you can make sense of a bunch of numbers that are being thrown at your way, even if it seems like more lower level right now.
Yeah. Here. And I'll let Olivia dive back in.
No, you're good. So are we ready to move on to the stats? Okay.
Sorry.
So for this project, you have two different types of statistics, and just overall in life, you have, oh yeah, Annie, did you say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if this will be posted on Blackboard later, the whole session.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have been recording the entire session, and then before the day is over, ideally as soon as the meeting is over, we'll upload the meeting because I know, so this is an asynchronous class, and I recognize not everybody has time available during this time period. So yeah, you should absolutely be able to come back and reflect on this. Yeah.
Oh, can we also have the PowerPoint itself? Because I would like to print this out and kind of.
Yes, and I, in a few slides, have essentially how you report all of your statistics in APA format with examples. So I absolutely will be sharing that so you guys can copy and paste.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, essentially you have descriptive statistics, which is exactly how it sounds. You're just describing your data or your participants within your data. And then inferential statistics, which means you're trying to create predictions based off of those numbers for real life people. So taking the numbers from your model or your SPSS output, making sense of those to make predictions for people in the real world. Does that make sense?
So as an example, they will talk about populations and they'll talk about samples. So your population is going to be your large group that you want to generalize. I put my hand in front of your
No,
face
you're
that you
good.
want to generalize out to. However, when we are running this empirical research, we just use a sample. And so that's why the significance of our results is going to matter, because we want this to be able to translate out, to generalize out in a larger way, if that makes sense. Or that's the goal of inferential statistics.
Mhm. Is that like the effect that you observe within your data set, or your effect with stress and well-being that's observed within your data set? Can we generalize that to everyone else? So within our data set, if we're seeing that stress and well-being are negatively related, can we generalize that to the stress and well-being experiences of everyone else? Or within our data set, are we seeing positive relationships between stress and well-being? Should we now change that generalization to everyone and say, okay, well, maybe our world has changed, so now as stress increases, so does well-being. This is now different for everyone. Or is it just the data or like a problem within your data set specifically? So inferential, you're trying to predict behavior, or you're trying to predict Y based off of X, or your DV based off of your IV. Whereas descriptives, you're just trying to describe the data set right in front of you. You're not caring about anyone else outside of the data set. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, that's fine. Just let me know so I can. Okay. So descriptive statistics summarize the data set, providing measures like the mean, median, and standard deviation to offer insights into the data's central tendency, that's your mean and your median, and variability, that is your standard deviation. The total number of participants are described as N. So N equals 500. That means there's 500 people within your sample or within your data set. So our N is 231. Frequencies is just the number of times a particular value or category appears in a data set. So if woman has the number 250 next to it, then the woman button was pressed 250 times, and we can assume that there are 250 women in the data set. Does that make sense? Right. And then we'll move on to descriptive statistics, which are your mean and standard deviation for the specific study. Mean is your average score on a variable, and standard deviation indicates how spread out the data points are around the mean of the distribution on like a standardized scale. So it says standard deviation because it's standardized units from the average. Inferential statistics are like your correlations. So you examine the relationship between two variables. It will be a number between -1 and 1. If negative, it means the relationship between the two variables is negative. So as stress increases, well-being decreases, and the direction of a correlation is negative or positive, but the strength is determined by the absolute value. So 0.8 or -0.8 and 0.8 are equally as strong, but -0.8 is stronger than 0.40. We've kind of discussed that already. That part is just like the most confusing part, I feel like, of statistics. Correlation does not determine causation, so it just determines if a relationship is present, the direction of that relationship, and the strength. We're not trying to predict anything. I'm just trying to see, is it there?
Understand it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it can be significant as marked by those stars in your SPSS output and is determined through those stars. Okay. How are we feeling? Thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down. I don't know what you're talking about.
We need to see some thumbs,
I know
guys.
this, yeah.
Yay! I saw them.
It's good. I think it definitely makes sense. I think like seeing it in the charts, like in the tables, will allow this to make a lot more sense because it's like, oh, because it's not that it's difficult to understand. I think that the things that we got wrong, which is why we're here, like we're just trying to understand it. And like I think once I see it, at least for me, I'll be able to say, oh, okay, this is why this was wrong, and this is why, you know, the descriptive statistics make sense over here.
Okay.
You know what? I just saw those chat box.
Okay.
Oh,
thanks.
yay.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So now we're going to move into inferential statistics. So there's a few different types here. First, t-tests. They compare two means between groups. So as we kind of talked about earlier, maybe we look at well-being as the dependent variable and social support is our moderating. So we're looking at people who have high levels of social support versus low levels. So testing if those who are high in social support have higher well-being after stressful events than people who are low in social support. So for groups, maybe you're looking at gender and narcissism, you're looking at, is there a difference on the average score of the narcissism scale in our data set between men and women? Does that make sense? Or if you're looking at life satisfaction between white and non-white participants.
Would the mean score of life satisfaction be higher than the mean, or would the mean score of life satisfaction for the white population be higher than the mean score of life satisfaction for the not white population?
Right, you're just comparing the average scores between two groups of interest. And typically those two groups of interest are your moderator variable. And then regression is a statistical technique used to model the relationship between one or more independent variables and a dependent variable. It goes beyond correlations by allowing researchers to predict the value of the dependent variable based on the values of the independent variable. So for example, we can use regression to predict that higher levels of stress will result in lower levels of well-being. So like those circles with the arrows that I showed you guys earlier, that's a regression model. And then moderated regression is what we're doing here. It's an extension of regression analysis that examines how the relationship between the independent and dependent variables is influenced by a third variable called a moderator. So the moderator affects the strength or direction of the relationship between two variables. So say, for example, with stress and well-being, maybe we have gender as a moderator, and we can see that for women, the relationship between stress and well-being actually goes from -0.6 to -0.8. So it actually gets stronger for women. Or for men, the relationship flips. It becomes +0.6. So then we can determine that based on gender, the relationship between stress and well-being can be different. For men, maybe as stress increases, well-being increases, but for women, they keep that remain negative relationship. Whatever, you're just looking at those two differences. So for example, we can investigate whether the relationship between stress and well-being is moderated by social support, suggesting that the negative impact of stress on well-being might be weaker for individuals with higher levels of social support. Does this make sense?
Yes, I do have one question. Sorry, I feel like I have like so many questions. I'm so
No,
sorry.
don't. Ask questions too. Go ahead.
So when performing a regression analysis in the SPSS software, is there just one regression analysis, or do you have to perform a separate moderated regression analysis?
Just one regression
Oh,
analysis.
okay.
And then
Okay.
you add all three of the variables. And
Okay.
that'll be at the end of this too.
Okay.
So, sorry about my title, it got kind of messed up, but this is my SPSS guide. So how to find descriptive statistics. At the very top of SPSS, when you have it open, you're going to see like a horizontal line of functions, kind of like you do on a MacBook. And up there, one of those that you're going to be pressing quite a bit in this class is Analyze. You'll hit descriptive statistics and frequencies. You'll move your variables to the right box, so your IV, QIV, and DV, and then we commonly do this to determine all questions were responded to or to determine sample sizes for demographic groups. Like I said, we want to see how many women versus men are in our observed sample. Oh, descriptives. You're doing essentially the same thing in SPSS. You're still hitting Analyze, Descriptive Stats, and then right underneath Frequencies is Descriptives. So you will, again, move your variables to the right box. This is to look at the average score and variation for variables like we discussed earlier. So for example, extroversion items are rated on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. The mean of extroversion for a sample is 1.5, then we know that the average level of extroversion for our sample is kind of low, and that our sample was maybe shy. So if it's 5, right, 2.5 is the halfway point of 5. So if our average score for our participants is under the average of the scale, then we can see that our sample had a quite low level of extroversion. Does that make sense?
So what she was talking about, she gave you the directions for how to get the numbers, but building upon that, it would be how to interpret the numbers. So you understand how to get the numbers through the steps and understanding that your analysis showed a 1.5. Then the interpretation becomes, what does it mean? What does 1.5 on a scale of 1 to 5 mean? And so this is when there's a little bit of creative freedom there as far as your interpretation. I mean, clearly you're not going to say that it's a strong score because we know better. But with that being said, you can see that it's on the lower side, but then so in the way that she said maybe they're shy, there could be other variables as well. I won't go into it because then I can just tie into things.
Yeah,
But we can go into like collectivism, individualism. We can tie in all these reasons for why they may have rated in a specific way,
yeah. So
depending on the context of where they are.
essentially, you're just wanting to make sure that your mean is still remaining that measure of central tendency. And if it's not, or it's kind of far away from what the average is expected to be, then you can think, oh, there might be something fishy going on within our data set. But that shouldn't be happening here in this class. So just pay attention to those like arrows. Those are what you're going to be clicking on for frequencies and descriptives. Okay. Now we're going to be learning how to compute an interaction variable. So up at the very top, you'll hit transform, and then that first bar, once you hit transform, should say compute variable. In the variable name box, you will write your IV, capital X, QIV. So for example, maybe your independent variable is depression and your quasi-independent variable is age in this data set. So you're essentially just writing the code of or the variable name. You don't want that to be super long, so you put shortened depression to dep, X in between the two terms, and then age. And in the numerical expression box, move over your independent predictor variable and quasi-independent moderating variable, and then put an asterisk in between the terms. So the column term, asterisk, column term. So for like depression and age, within your data set, it's called something else. I don't know exactly, but it is maybe like undercase or lowercase like DEP, and then you would put an asterisk and then age. So whatever the variable name is in SPSS, you'll put that, the asterisk, and then the other variable name in SPSS, whereas this one is just your own naming of the variable, of your new variable. Does that make sense? Because I feel like I confused myself too.
When you look at, so when you type transform and you type compute variable, you're going to see a tall, or I'm sorry, at the top, there's a skinny box to the left. That's where you would put your variable name in. And then to the right, there's a larger box where you can put your data or your variables, I apologize. And so understanding there's going to be two boxes, the one on the left and the one on the right. The one on the left is going to be your new name. The one on the right is going to be the variables that you're combining. So when you put those two variables in the box, you just want to put that asterisk between them. So new variable name is in the left box, but the variables that you are bringing together go on the right side. Does that make sense? Going with yes.
Okay. So now we're moving on to our inferential statistics. First, looking at correlation, you'll hit analyze, correlate by variate, and then transfer all of your variables that you want to correlate over to the second box. Check show only lower triangle. So as Dr. Wright explained in her regression video, a correlation matrix is a direct mirror of itself. And so it can be kind of confusing when you see numbers or those correlations repeated multiple times within the same table. And so this can kind of make the second half or like the not needed half empty. So then you can only focus on like the numbers that matter. And then confidence interval, check, make sure it's at 0.95. And then t-test, analyze, compare means, independent samples t-test. You will move your predictor variable to the test variable box and then move your moderator to the grouping variable box. Define groups, make sure that the levels of the groups are the same within your grouping in the analysis as well as in the raw data. So if male or men and women are coded as 1 and 2, make sure it's coded as 1 and 2 in your grouping when you do the analysis as well. Let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. And then essentially you're just looking at, are there differences for your quasi-independent variable and your independent variable? And then if there are, you can use that as justification to conduct a moderated regression analysis. Okay, so now we're into the regression analysis and what you click in SPSS. So you will hit analyze, regression, linear. You will move the dependent variable to the dependent variable box and the predictor variables to the independent variable box and hit OK. And then once that output pops up, you're going to be looking for an ANOVA table for the relevant output. Did that answer your question, hopefully?
Okay, so and just to reiterate also, remember what your research question is, because that's going to be, they're going to be two different analyses. So your DV is going to be your outcome. Remember that. And then your independent variable is going to be what leads to that outcome. So, and I apologize, I can't remember who said, but like as an example, technology and depression and gender, it's is technology leading to depression or is depression leading to technology? And you're going to want to understand that from what your prediction is, what your hypothesis is. Make sense?
So for me, I'm predicting that technology use leads to depression. Like an increased technology use leads to more depression or higher self-report of depression.
Yep. So depression would be your dependent variable because that's
Yep.
going to be the outcome. And then you said you hypothesize that as technology use increases, it will lead to that depression. So that would be your independent variable because you're predicting that that technology use is going to lead to depression. Did that
Okay.
make sense the way I said that?
Yes. And
Okay.
I have two hypotheses actually.
Okay.
Let me think they're both listed here. Yeah. So the first one is women use social networking websites more frequently than other genders, which really it's men because there are no other genders other than women and men with the
This is
self.
simplified. I would say, yeah, there are different ways to measure gender, I would say, especially more
Mhm.
recently, but just the simplification of just understanding the analyses. Um, it was just kept to the two.
Okay, understood, understood. And then the second hypothesis is, or hypotheses, women will experience more depressive symptoms when using social networking websites compared to other genders.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that makes sense. And so when you're going into understanding the mean groups, you would look at your mean male and your mean female on those variables. And so that would be where you would find that information to answer that hypothesis. Does that make sense? Did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Oh boy. Now it's scary.
So after that, I don't have any tables in here yet. I can maybe do that next week. Discussing that. You're essentially just taking your output tables from SPSS and then recreating it in a Word document. And then she has a video on that. I don't remember the like where it's precisely located, but if I can find it, I can send out an announcement later when I send out this PowerPoint as well. So APA formatting is something
Huge.
is something that is so important to writing a research paper. And I can kind of walk everyone through the APA formatting guide as well if people still have questions about that. Does anyone know what the APA formatting guide is, or does anyone not know what it is? I just want to see where I'm at with everyone.
Have you guys ever had to do APA citations or APA style papers in any previous classes? I know some classes will do MLA, some are APA. Have you guys had any experience with these?
Yes, both, but more so APA.
Okay. Yeah.
And so like the title page, I feel like I've like mastered that. I don't have any issues with that. It's just like, is
The
there APA format for
Yeah,
this?
what needs to be italicized, what
Yeah.
needs bold.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the part where it gets really fun, is with statistics, because there's so many different rules on
I
how to
didn't think she
report
was
them.
gonna say fun. I thought she was gonna
Yeah.
go something else.
Yeah. So I give examples here.
But I just want to point out real quick, all statistical name abbreviations in italics, that is one that I have put in my brain over and over again. I would say the longer that you do the APA, the more comfortable that you get with it. But as you look over these PowerPoints at a later point in time, even after this meeting, pay attention to the italicized. I would say pay attention to the decimal points. Yeah.
Yeah, so APA formatting, I was never familiar with APA formatting until I did an independent research project with the professor like outside of a class. So I had only ever done MLA formatting. And so APA formatting is essentially just how we write research papers, but for more of the science fields, because we report a lot of statistics in APA format. And so there's a guide that I give you the link to right here, the Purdue OWL APA formatting guide. And this is my best friend.
I still use it.
I used it
still
always.
use it.
Because it is so much to remember.
Yeah.
Because it's like in text citations, where does the period go? Where does the parentheses go? It depends if it's at the end of a sentence or at the beginning of a sentence. And so there's all these little technical details that are going to end up with you like losing points if you don't have them precise. And they're just tedious and annoying and not fun
And we can't change it because we have to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone who conducts research has to report in APA formatting. So all statistical name abbreviations should be in italics. Don't know why. In general, report numbers to 2 decimal places. So 7.50, even though it's a 0, you're still going to report it. 3.47, 2.00, 0.02. And we're going to talk about when zeros go before the decimal point in a second. So the exception is that p-values can be reported to 3 decimals if the p is less than 0.01. So for a lot of you guys, your significance value is 0.001. So you wouldn't report 0.00, you would report 0.001, even though it kind of breaks a rule. There's all these different like loopholes or adjustments you have to make. See, like this, it's just so complicated. And that's why I wanted to give the guide. And it's all throughout the entire paper, title page, headers, all the way through reference
It will be on
page.
every single
Page that you write.
Times New Roman 12.
Yeah, double space font. So adding leading zeros to all numbers under 1. So if your average, hopefully, is not a number that starts with 0, but if it is, you would write 0.31. An exception would be any number that can't possibly be larger than 1. Like we were just talking about correlations. They're between -1 and 1. They will never not be a decimal point. And same with p-values. P-values will always be less than 1. So for p-values and for correlations, you will never put a 0 in front of a decimal point, even though for every other number, you have to. And then that is important because you're reporting both correlations and p-values in your paper. Put spaces around all kinds of signs. So don't put like p less than sign 0.001, put p space less than space 0.001. There is no space. Is everyone getting really excited to start writing their paper? There's no space between statistical abbreviation and the reported degrees of freedom. So T in parentheses, your degrees of freedom, F in parentheses, your degrees of freedom. And you'll be reporting your degrees of freedom in this class as well. Report exact p-value unless SPSS displays as 0.000 less than 0.001, which is just usually never happens. Or 1 or above 0.999. And that shouldn't happen either. Those are like the 2 most extreme cases that you'll probably never run across ever in your career. Avoid beginning sentences with a number. This is a big one as well. If a sentence must start with a number, write it out as a word. So actually any number under 20 should be written out as a word in APA format. Any number above 20, you can use like the numbers.
Unless it starts a sentence.
Unless it starts a sentence, and then you have to write it out. Note, so this project is based, like we talked about, on correlational data. Therefore, only correlational language is used. Thus, the first sentence of most interpretations includes the language significant relationship between the IV and DV. However, if the IV had been experimentally manipulated or due to random assignment, you would change this language to be significant effect of IV on DV. But we're just looking at the correlational relationship.
But words are important. Just going into correlations, don't explain cause. They only explain strength and direction of the relationship. And so that's going to be why it's going to be really important to report as either significant or not significant, and make sure that you use those words: significant relationship or not a significant relationship.
Yes. So reading output just briefly, because again, I don't have any of the tables right in front of me, but with your NOVA table for your regression, it's pretty straightforward. You're looking at one number at the very end under the significance column. It's the only number in that SIG column, and it's your p-value, so it'll be probably 0.001 with a significance star. But essentially, mean is going to be represented by M, standard deviation by SD, correlation by R. T-test, you're going to be looking at that significance statistic or the p-value within the significance column. And then again, same with regression, you're going to be looking at the p-value or the significance statistic. And then significance is marked by a star next to it. Again, the more stars you have, the more significant the relationship is. And p-values have a threshold of 0.05 in psychology. So if your p-value is under 0.05, you have a significant relationship and there should be a star next to your p-value. But if it's above 0.05, it is a non-significant relationship and there should not be a star. Does that make sense?
Moving on.
Okay, because that's it. All I've got for you. And then this is the link to the Purdue OWL, and I can kind of see if that works. Can everyone still see or no?
Yes.
Okay, so general format, this is
Awesome.
what saves my life. I recently just had to write up a research proposal for a poster at a conference, which is like exactly what you guys are doing here. And I refer back to this so many times when reporting my statistics. And even just writing like my purpose for my paper. So here you can look at like your in-text citations. So if any of you are like getting really annoyed with your assignment grades that I'm giving out because of APA formatting, this will be your best friend as well. I essentially just refer back to this whenever I give you advice, or if you are still not like quite hitting the mark for APA formatting, I will include the link to this on your feedback. Essentially, you can see in-text citations are dependent on the amount of authors, and then also if they go at the beginning or the end of a sentence, so they may look differently. Also within empirical research, I'm just going to add this, try to stay away as much as possible from direct quotations and try to just do paraphrase. So just take points from the article that you read about and try putting it into your own words and then use citations as such. So you will be like, according to Jones, so the first author's last name and then the year that it was published in parentheses, and then your paraphrase, they use a quotation, but you can use a paraphrase. And then but that's if you put it at the beginning of the sentence, or sometimes you'll put it at the end, where you can just say like, students had difficulty using APA style, and then in parentheses, Jones, comma, 1998. And that would be your APA formatting. And then there's examples throughout, so you can double check. They have an example paper here somewhere. Sorry, give me 1 sec. Types of APA papers. This kind of overviews your literature review, empirical report. So again, we talk about your intro and your methods, what should be included. So your title page, your abstract, intro, methods, results, discussion, references.
And those are your headers.
Those are all included in your study for this class. And then, sorry, I'm trying to find this paper. APA sample paper. This, if you haven't looked at an APA sample paper, just do it like tonight and read some of these examples that they have here, or just not even read, go through the formatting and double check like what it looks like. Like this is what your title page should look like. You should have an abbreviated title with all capital words as your header and your page number. And then your header title should be shorter than your actual title. Like it's a bunch of these little formatting rules.
But what I would also say that's beneficial is scientific articles tend to be very redundant. And so especially with your methods section and even going into results, it can be really beneficial to read other papers and just see the way that they put it in there. You have a little bit more creative freedom in your introduction and in your discussion, but within your methods and your results, it's pretty precise. And so if you did struggle at all with that, I highly recommend it because again, APA, it's a specific formatting separate from if you're doing 305, 306 lab or you're publishing in a journal. APA is the same throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna be using this probably in like every psychology class going forward that you have until you graduate. So it's just really important that you understand APA formatting, that you're comfortable writing in APA format.
And if it takes you a while to be comfortable, that's okay.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Just for everyone.
Okay, so if it's okay, I want to ask, are there any questions that you feel like are still lingering or maybe we didn't address?
I do have one. You said if the p-value is above, what was it? Then something.
I'm sorry, I just popped in. I would encourage you to submit any assignments that you have. I'm going to encourage you to submit any assignments. I don't want to officially say that there would be extra time, but I would just encourage you to submit them. And with that being said, the entire reason that we're doing this video is just, this is a hard class to do asynchronously. It is a hard class.
And just a hard class in general. I mean, psychological research, at least for me, I was always under the impression psychology was like intuitive. And so I never realized just how difficult psychological research was until I was in the weeds of it. And then I really actually ended up enjoying it. But it is like, it's not as you would expect oftentimes as an undergrad psychology major to be conducting like this level of statistical analysis. And it can be scary as someone used to taking psych classes, kind of being thrown into like a stats class too.
Oh, good.
But yeah, so your p-value threshold is 0.05. So if your p-value is above that 0.05 threshold, you will not have significant stars next to it. And so your regression model is not significant. But if it's below 0.05, there will be significant stars next to the p-value, and it means that your research question, your hypothesis is supported. And so for you, you can say that there are gender differences in the relationship between technology and depression if you get that significant p-value. But if you get one above 0.05, you would say that there's no gender differences.
No significant gender differences.
Bingo.
You use the word significant or not significant always.
Yeah.
And going into it, sometimes, like I said, there's more creative freedom with your introduction and with your discussion, but science is redundant. It is. The entire point is to make somebody understand it. And so if you feel like you're being mechanical in your language, that's okay. It's okay to be mechanical in your language. It's okay to put away your thesaurus. I like thesauruses. However, there's a time and a place for it. And I would say don't stress about that. I would work on just the scientific part. Yeah. So okay, before I go any further, are there any other questions specifically that we didn't get to? Just as far as maybe
Like
adding some
SPSS.
clarification with SPSS. Want to stop sharing? No.
Oh, I do. Sorry, did someone else? I've had like 50 questions, so if someone else wants to go, go ahead, but I did have one more.
You are absolutely fine. You go right ahead.
Um, so with that being my research question, the one that I gave you all,
Yeah.
am I including, because I'm only using one item from like the technology use, I'm only using social media, or what is that, social networking. So for the depressive ones, am I selecting all of those or just the overall depressive data?
So as far as I'm aware with the analysis, we're using combined scores. So it's not like I don't know that you would be able to do,
You may need to change the vocabulary to technology
yeah, just so
usage.
that you would do the combined technology use as your IV with your depression as the TV.
However, what I would tell you, and this can go, and I know you guys aren't there yet, but I would just tell you to jot this down for in a few weeks. Sometimes when these things come up, you can use them in your conclusion or future directions or limitations. As an example, when you get to the end of your paper, you could say, um, future directions could be exploring the single component of social media usage from technology. So even though maybe you, like for your question itself, you just change the verbiage to technology usage just because that's the measure that was used. Um, but still hold on to that component because it really would be interesting to explore, and that is a valid, positive future research direction.
And could help you reach your word limit on this paper too, and your future actions.
Going into creative writing, hold on to that
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I think maybe I didn't ask the right question. I wanted to know, should I use, here, I'm gonna pull up the SPSS. So like when I'm doing the data outputs, am I selecting, so for like my variables, I'm selecting gender, I'm selecting SNS underscore use. Am I selecting only the data for like DEP underscore all, or am I selecting every single individual item?
No, just the all.
The combined, doesn't
Oh,
it?
that's what I was asking.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
Oh,
right
okay.
combined. Yep.
gotcha. Just all. Okay, am I doing?
But I did give you solid feedback as far as the verbiage that you're using.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
like within your hypotheses, make sure it says technology usage, just because that's the measure.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, just writing that down.
We're okay.
Okay.
So you guys do, I know I saw it in the chat, but you guys do feel better from this. I realize it was a really long meeting when you don't necessarily have the time for it, but I mean, you do feel it was beneficial.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. If anyone else has questions, I am going to mute for the rest of this because I feel like I've been.
No, we want all the questions, and then we're gonna go trick or treating. No, we're not, but I wish. Yeah.
Question is, what does she mean by there's 1 week to resubmit an assignment? Does it mean 1 week after the deadline that she gave, or 1 week after the feedback to fix what we got wrong?
That's a great question.
To be honest, I don't want to. I would like to clarify. Like, let us find out,
I'll
and we
send
can
an email,
clarify.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would also just maybe double check the syllabus to see if that language is in the syllabus as well, so that you might be able to find the answer directly from there, or if there's like conflicting information, we can try to make a little more sense of it.
I think in the
Yes.
syllabus it says a week from when we get feedback.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't make sense
Oh, I didn't hear you. You cut out, Kate.
to like submit it on a Wednesday and then like not get feedback until like a different one.
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. So, and then Kaden, I think you said you had a question about the regression. Was that able, or did I clear
It
that
was
up?
within a
Yeah, so
five.
it was like really similar to their question about the regression, about like the dependent variable, because mine's gender, and how that affects prosocial behavior, which affects depressive symptoms.
Give me a second. I'm gonna
Um,
stop sharing. Keep talking. I'm gonna stop sharing just because I want to pull up your assignment real quick.
okay, because I've submitted it like 2 or 3 times now, and
Okay.
I'm like not getting it correct. Because at one point I was told to take everything about gender out, which didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I tell you
Um,
for the okay. So for the purpose of this recording, um, I'm gonna when we're done recording, I will stop recording this video and I'll look at it, but that way I'm not going through your personal information while it's being recorded. But
okay,
that being said, before you leave this meeting, we'll look at it.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or concerns? Oh, wait, there's a new message. Yay! Thanks, Joanna. Good,
I'm good.
good. Yeah, and I would encourage you guys, I would encourage you to work on the assignments and resubmit if possible. I would tell you, Olivia and I have plans on ideally, maybe
I'm hoping to grade this weekend. That's my hope is I'm staying in this whole weekend and goodbye to my
you
youth
should feel
and
so bad for Olivia.
I'm gonna hopefully grade everyone this weekend and
Yeah.
respond to everyone's emails that I'm not
Yeah.
reaching.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it's okay with you guys, I want to go ahead and end this recording. You can still stay on, but I want to pause and stop recording. We will stop.